And we start with this developing story out of Mozambique, where the Constitutional Council is currently delivering a pronouncement on the October 9th election results. The country's electoral commission declared FRELIMO's Daniel Chapo the winner, and his runner-up Venancio Mondlane rejected the results and called for massive demonstrations. Now there are also fears in Maputo that the chaos will continue if the results are actually not validated. And Mozambique has since been in the grip of political stalemate since the controversial polls, where a number of protests have been masterminded by Mondlane, who seeks electoral justice. And recently, a Mozambican delegation met South African ministers led by International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ronald Lamola in Malelane in Mpumalanga. This in order to mitigate the impact of sporadic disruptions at the Lebombo border post between South Africa and Mozambique. All right, let's now bring in Professor Christopher Isike, Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria. Prof, the official results are in, or we're anticipating, as we know, the whole country has been on edge before today's ruling. So on the disputed results that actually led to various protests and unrest in that particular country, what is your current reaction, please?
Well, everyone is waiting with bated breath to hear the outcome. The opposition seem to think that the outcome is already a foregone conclusion, that the courts would validate the election results, and that there will be, protests, not just immediately, but also on the 15th of January. So it's one of those cases that reflects, the declining fortunes of liberation parties in Southern Africa, especially, that have largely failed to deliver the dividends of democracy to their citizens.
Mm-hmm. Professor, do you think the impasse following today's pronouncement of the official results will actually solve the current tensions in Mozambique?
Well, not necessarily. There'll be violence. The state will respond with more violence. That militarization, depending on how organized the opposition and different groups in society, especially the ordinary people, are, they will also come out with a counter response to state violence. So it will be a cycle of violence. But I think that the president of the country has been open to speaking to the opposition, and looks like he may be able to arrest the situation if there is some kind of agreement. But we're not sure. We don't know what the outcome of that discussion between the opposition leader Mondlane and President UC was. So we'll just have to wait and see. But to answer you more directly, it's not likely to, more violence is not likely to solve the problem unless things really degenerate to a point where the country really becomes ungovernable.
Because, looking at that margin, Professor, between a 22% and a 72%, it's quite a lot. And I don't foresee how, of course, even the Constitutional Council is going to have to work some miracles to overturn that 22%. But on a wider perspective, Professor, there seems to be this growing trend, right, of allegations of electoral fraud or rigging. And I will tell you now, in many of these cases, what is common is that you have a people that are tired of the ruling party, which almost always is a liberation movement in that particular country that has been in power also just for far too long without much results. Is this not a time that bodies now, like the AU, start drafting an election conflict resolution mechanism for such specialized cases, and to ensure that the disputed results are really investigated and grievances are addressed well before announcing results prematurely, as this casts a lot of aspersions on why the bodies would rush to actually announce results in the middle of disputes?
Well, it's a playbook. They all act on a playbook, and many of this is a contagion from different countries. We saw this happen in Nigeria last year in 2023, right? So they all borrow from each other. We've heard of how Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwean president is looked up to in the region as someone you can learn from on how to rig elections. But you see, those results, I'll come back to the point about what the AU can do. And maybe I should just simply answer it now by asking you another question. The question is, who is the AU? The AU is also made up of, these same leaders who benefit from rigging elections. So what is the motivation for them to actually put in laws that would eventually unseat them? Even the use of technology, the digitalization, and ensuring that, and results are announced as at when they are supposed to be announced right on the spot, which could have helped to curb some of the discrepancies in results, have been simply ignored in some of these countries outside of even Southern Africa. So you talk about a wide gap between 71% and 22%, but that's the official results claimed by the electoral management body, the Electoral Commission, and the state, right? The opposition is saying that by their own results tabulations, they won the elections by 53% to 36% for Chapo, Daniel Chapo. So the question is who's right, who actually won, who has incentive to rig. Those are questions that need to be addressed. And like you said, the real solution is to address all disputes, before elections are validated and announced as finally official. But if that was to be the case, constitutions will have to change. The AU can help with putting laws in place, but there's also the question of enforcement when these laws are not respected. The bottom line is for us to have what I call new social contracts that will help to redefine the state and to in place governance systems that work for the people.
And Prof, just while we're on the allegations of vote rigging or election fraud, what do you think we need as the African continent to ensure that we don't find ourselves in this similar situation in other countries as well, where election results are disputed purely because of the technologies that were used? We're still literally going and queuing in ballots. When are we going to go digital? At least this is going to remove one part of doubt for the voters that go and actually queue to cast their ballots.
Well, the problem basically, fundamentally, is that we do not have social contracts. The states that we inherited from colonialism are states that were never established to be developmental at all in the first place. They were all exploitation machines. So we have continued to operate these states in the same way we saw the colonialists operate them. So that's the starting point. We need to sit down as a people and have social contracts between government and citizens. And in those social arrangements will come out a new political system of democracy, a social variant of democracy like what we see in the Nordic countries, like what you see in Canada, where the state takes responsibility for providing social goods like education and public health and setting basic infrastructure that will spur the enterprising virtues of citizens, to produce. So I'm not calling for a socialist or communist state. I'm talking about a social variant of democracy that can operate within a liberal, states, if you like. Right, but the state has to be a liberal economy, rather. So that's the starting point. We need to have those, and the problem is once we have those, then we'll have the proper understanding of what a state is supposed to be about and what governance is supposed to intend. If you mean well for your people, if you want to do well for your people, you cannot force yourself on those people. You cannot rig elections. You cannot steal elections for you to govern a people by force, right? So that is the same fundamental misunderstanding about what the state is about and what governance is supposed to serve. And our leaders misunderstand governance positions to mean that they are leaders and masters, whereas they're actually servants of the people. And you cannot force yourself on the people that you purport to serve. So there needs to be a social contract that clarifies this misunderstanding of the purpose of state and governance. And thereafter, once we have a social democracy in place, people understand the rule of law, then it will be easy for everyone to agree that let's digitalize elections. we have reached stages where we should actually be using voting machines, like we use ATM machines in the country. They will be all over the country, and people can vote anytime during a window period for elections. And those will be tabulated electronically. Of course, like we have seen in America, those things can be manipulated somehow. But they are a more trustworthy way of dealing with elections, because the issue here is also about legitimacy. People are tired of ruling parties that have not delivered for them, for years on, right? And they are coming out and protesting in their own ways. And that's what we've seen happening in much of Southern Africa, and the citizens have won in some instances, like we saw in Botswana, we saw in Zambia earlier on, we saw in Kenya, that brought Ruto to power, even though the same young people that put him in power also want him out now. And that's the beauty of democracy. So we need to have these discussions. We need to put in place social contracts, that we all agree to and becomes legitimate and will become keepers of every one of us, because we buy into them in the first place. As it is, these things are alien to us. These entities we call state, they are alien to us, and they are being worse because they do not serve our common interests as a people.
I mean, Professor, who do we need to have these discussions with? Because you've just alluded to the fact that basically the AU, who is the AU? And their silence on critical as well as key issues like this one, it leaves quite a bitter taste in one's mouth. So let's talk about that. Where do we get to sit down and have these discussions that are going to ensure that policy framework is drafted for each and every sovereign country to ensure that they also undertake under such rules and matters?
Well, the AU is a supranational body, and it's only as strong as its members, and the members are the states themselves. So for you to fix the AU, you need to first fix the states within. So it is for each of us as citizens of different countries to start putting this discussion on the public agenda. And me and you are starting it. We're having this discussion now. It should be subject of conferences, political conferences, academic conferences. It should be so much popularized that at a point, everyone will have no choice but to begin to see the relationship between what we are saying and the success of these entities we call state. Business will have to understand that their interests will be better served when the state is stable, when the state governs well, when the state provides infrastructure, because it's going to make it cheaper for them to do business. Everybody will believe in the state. There will be peace and stability, and they would have more profit. It's a win-win for all stakeholders, but maybe there are too many people benefiting from the status quo as it is, and it's a discussion that many people are not willing to have. But we have to keep talking about these things until it gets to the public agenda sufficiently enough to fill the airwaves, and maybe a political party or a civil society group or even the media itself would force it on, and that discussion can be had.
Thank you so much for your input, Professor. As we continue, of course, awaiting that lengthy deliberation of the pronunciation there of the results. That is Professor Isike, Access UP, weighing in there on the election results in Mozambique. We're going to take you live there to give you these live proceedings from Maputo. And of course, and unfortunately, we cannot give you the blow-by-blow, minute-by-minute updates. But these are the current proceedings there from Maputo on those election results. Now, we do understand that there were pronunciations by, of course, Mondlane, who said today the whole country must stop and, of course, just take to the streets because they really need to be contesting these elections. Mondlane called for prayers, even in the southeastern African countries on Sunday, saying we are giving the opportunity to pray for the judges of the Constitutional Council, to pray for its chair, so that on Monday, from her, justice comes out. The electoral truth does not come out as a lie. Those were some sentiments from Mondlane, and we're understanding that this deliberation is going to take a lot further to actually deliver, about an hour late. So we might not actually have covered it here during this bulletin. In fact, it is in Portuguese, so we are trying also to just give you a blow-by-blow update on what we can gather for you.